There comes a point where you realize the version of you that survived isn't the version that can tell the truth. Cloud spends most of his life doing just that. I call it performing. And not in the obvious way. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. Well, I mean, technically he was, Tifa. But deeper than that, he was trying to exist without being dismissed. Small town, big dreams, and nobody really saw him until he decided to become someone they couldn't ignore. So, he made a promise. He joined Soldier, became a mercenary, acted like nothing touched him. Cold, efficient. You know, the kind of guy who can walk into danger and make it look routine. Except, none of it was real. The uniform, the confidence, the detachment, all of it was borrowed, built from pieces of someone else's story because his own didn't feel strong enough to stand on. And here's the kicker. It worked. People believed him. They needed him to be that version. You know, the one who had answers, the one who didn't flinch. But being in that survival mode comes with an expiration date. And you know, you can only hold that posture for so long before your body reminds you it was never supposed to be permanent. And Cloud spent so much time being the version people needed that he forgot what was underneath. Or maybe he knew. And that's why he kept trying to be different. Because the version that survived, so to speak, wasn't built to be known, but it was built to be useful. And when you spent years being useful, the idea of being yourself, you know, flawed, uncertain, smaller than the image that you curated, it starts to feel like a betrayal. To them, to the story that's happening, but most importantly, to the person you worked so hard to actually become. And to be honest, you've probably done some version of this. Not to the same extreme extent, but something similar. Maybe you weren't pretending to be a soldier, so to speak, but you've worn a version of yourself that made things easier. You know, the one who doesn't complain, the one who has it together, the one people can rely on without having to worry about you. And maybe that version worked for a little while. It got you through, kept you safe, gave you a place in rooms where your real self might not have fit in. But then something shifts. You grow, you start questioning things you used to accept. You realize the performance is costing more than it's giving. And the people who love that version, well, they don't know what to do with the one who's changing. And that's when circles start shrinking. Not dramatically, not big blowouts, just distance. Conversations that used to flow with your familiar friends or close compadres now feel strained. Invitations stop coming, and you're still in the group chat, but nobody's really talking to you anymore. And you start to realize you didn't lose people. You lost access to a version of yourself they needed you to stay. Because growth makes people uncomfortable when it disrupts the role that you played for them. And truly, I think everyone is playing a role. They don't say it out loud, but you can feel it. The confusion, the quiet judgment, the sense that you're somehow betraying an agreement you never actually made. And I've been there. Watched friendships fade because I stopped performing the part they expected, stopped being the convenient version, and started setting boundaries. Started saying no. Started asking for things I used to just handle alone. And the silence that followed taught me more than any one conversation could have. Cloud's breakdown happens in pieces. He doesn't just wake up one day and realize he's been lying. It unravels slowly. Memories that don't line up. Moments where the mask slips and he can't quite catch it in time. People asking questions he doesn't actually have the answers for. And eventually he has to face it. The version of himself that everyone relied on was a construction built from shame, trauma, and the desperation needed to be somebody worth remembering. The real Cloud? Guess what? He's weaker, quieter. The guy who didn't make it into Soldier, the one who carried someone else's sword because he couldn't carry his own story. And here's what's brutal about that revelation. It doesn't fix anything. Telling the truth doesn't bring people back, doesn't undo the years spent hiding, doesn't make the relationships built on performance suddenly authentic. Some people stay, and most don't, and that's okay. Because when familiarity is the only thing holding a relationship together, honesty breaks it. I learned that the hard way. There were people I thought who would understand. People I thought knew me well enough to see past the performance, and people who knew the true version of what I showed them. And when that version changed, so did their interest. Silence says more than confrontation sometimes, and there's usually no fight, there's no closure, just the slow realization that you're not part of their story anymore, and they're not part of yours. And it wasn't because anyone did something wrong to you, but it's because the only version of you that they had room for was the one that stayed small. Cloud eventually rebuilds, not into the person he pretends to be, into someone quieter, more real, less certain about everything except the fact that he's tired of being this souped up soldier that he made himself to be. And the people who stay, they're the ones who never needed for him to be that figure in the first place. There's no clean lesson here, if I'm being honest. No moment where it all makes sense, just the quiet understanding that surviving and living are different things. And sometimes choosing to live means losing the people who only knew how to love you when you were acting. So, here's what I'm wondering after playing this and giving some of my thoughts on it. Have you ever outgrown a version of yourself and lost people who couldn't let that version go? If so, drop it in the comments if this hits.